Thank you for tuning in to The Political Soup, where you hear editorial about the issues of the day and political philosophy. Your hosts are Nick Alex, our progressive, Dana and Pugh, our conservative, Paul Laws, our classical liberal, and here's our moderator and your host, John Toll.
Hello again, and welcome back to the Political Soup podcast. I am John Toll, your host for the evening, and we have our usual participants below. We have Dana, Nick, and Paul. And if you don't know what they're all about, you'll find out soon enough. Tonight we're going to do a little bit of a mix-up. We're going to play with a couple different topics tonight. And the first thing we're going to start out with is the Moscow bill to ban U.S. adoption of Russian orphans. There's an article on Time Magazine titled similarly. We'll have the link down below once Paul hooks up the post-production for us. Thanks, Paul. Basically, what this is talking about is that Russia passed a bill to sort of retaliate for something pretty horrendous that happened here. They didn't know how to do it because we don't have vacation homes there. We don't have a lot of investments there. So they decided they were going to ban all the adoptions of the children, a bunch of orphans, hundreds of orphans, that were planning to go home to their American parents shortly. But I'm going to open this up and give it to Nick. He's our resident expert at this point. So, Nick, why don't you give us more of an idea of what's going on with this and why it happened?
Sure. I think the issue, as with anything that happens with most legal type of battles, especially when you're talking about diplomatic relationships between countries, you're talking about politics and retaliations and whatnot, and basically. What happened was years ago, not too many years ago, but a couple of years ago, a whistleblower within the Russian government that was trying to, expose some corruption, ended up going to prison and then being withheld some needed medical attention and ended up dying in prison. And so the Congress here passed a resolution or an act that basically called Russia out for doing this and wanting them to hold the hold the people that put this guy in prison responsible for human rights violations. And after that, Russia wanted to somehow retaliate, so they kind of hit at a pretty sensitive area. We're talking about kids that most of them are 3-4 years old. A lot of them have special needs, and instead of letting them to go home to families that were willing to love and care for them and giving them the medical attention that they need, they're going to stay in their orphanages and not go home to their families.
Yeah, and Putin has some really strange comments about it when he was trying to defend what he had done. He said, do you think it's normal? What's normal about being humiliated? You like that? What are you, a sadomasochist? The country will not be humiliated. I don't know. He tried to turn it around. It was very, very strange.
Yeah, I don't know. And listen, this issue hits close to home for me. I'm an adoptive parent. I have 2 kids that we adopted. My wife and I adopted, and we brought them home when they were babies. We adopted infants from the United States instead of internationally, but being in the adoption community, I know lots of people that have gone overseas. I know people that have gone to Russia and Ukraine. The people choose their own path and what they feel most comfortable with. And so the people that chose Russia here are basically getting bit in the backside because of a political dispute, and that's what's really tragic here. That's what's really unfair. I mean, I can't. Russia can determine. I mean, they're a sovereign nation. They can determine what their laws are, and I wouldn't argue against that. What they should have done here, if they had any shred of decency, though, is the adoptions that were in flight should be allowed to go through, and the people that have been making those arrangements and spending their hard-earned dollars, because let me tell you, it's expensive to adopt. Whether you do it domestically or overseas, it's expensive. We're talking literally $30,000-$40,000 to do this. They should have let those things go through. But it's an unfortunate situation. It disgusts me, but Russia can do what they want with their own laws. I mean, these are still Russian citizens they're talking about until they're adopted. So.
All right, and Dana, I'm kind of curious. What do you think about kind of all this going down. I don't expect a lot of contention between you guys on this particular topic, but
first of all, I'm having some technical difficulties here. Does it sound okay?
yeah, you sound fine.
Okay, good. I'll keep going. I thought we resolved this before the show, but it's come back with a vengeance, apparently. Yeah, it's Russia's basically making a lot of people pay who had nothing to do with this. Nick mentions the parents, but obviously the children as well. One of the articles that we read talked about a 3-year-old girl with HIV, and I'm sure there are plenty of other kids who each have their own challenges and or disabilities and whatnot. And even perfectly healthy children too. It's not to say that they're not getting the short end of the stick here. Doesn't much make a lot of sense to me, but I think a lot of what Putin has done doesn't make a whole lot of rational sense to me either.
Yeah, it's sort of a strange move using children as a political weapon.
Yeah.
And Paul, how about you?
Yeah, it's definitely a strange move using children as a political weapon, although we see it done often. This particular case is extremely harsh. They wanted to get back at our politicians, but essentially they're getting back at their own kids. It's it's wrong. It's a bad move.
It kind of, and just one thing that Dan said made me really think about this. Listen, having gone through the adoption route and knowing the uncertainty that it takes. I mean, again, I was blessed never to have a change of heart, meaning that that the adoption fell through. But again, being in the community and knowing so many adoptive parents, it happens a lot where people have made plans and they certainly have every intention to adopting, and then something happens where the adoption plan falls through. Those things are really, really hard, and it's really sad to see that happen. Those of us that have gone through adoption realize that that's a risk. I think that's what makes this even just more such a tragedy that we're having these basically these adoption plans fall through because of politics as opposed to some other condition that might be happening, whether it's a birth mother that decided that they didn't want to place their child and rather would parent or something like that. I mean, those things happen too. So all adoptive parents know that, knowingly go into this with the idea that it might not work out, or you might get attached to a child and then you don't get to adopt that child. But when politicians get in the way and laws and retaliation, I mean, that just makes it even more tragic.
It's understandable, and part of the reason that we're bringing this one up on the show is just kind of to bring it more to light for some of you who haven't been paying attention to it. It's just kind of one of those important things we want to get out there. Paul or Dana, anything else to say on the subject?
No, I think yeah,
it's pretty well covered. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, guys, we're going to move on to the 2012 year in review. And basically what we're going to do with this is come up with a couple positives and negatives as far as stories or big events that happened in 2012 that we think are just worth mentioning. So I'm going to start out with Nick. Nick, why don't you tell us one of the most negative events that you can recall from 2012 that's affected us as a country?
I'm going to throw out a couple numbers here at you. 59,645,387. That's one number.
Okay.
58,283,036. That's the second number. The difference between those numbers is about a 1,362,351. Anybody have an idea what that is?
I'm out. Dana and Paul?
Got me.
Nope.
Okay, so the first number was the number of votes that were cast for Democratic members of the House of Representatives. The second number was the number of votes that were cast for GOP members of the House of Representatives. So despite the fact that over 1.3 million more votes were cast for Democrats in the House, they remain in the minority, and this is one of the first time since, I believe, the 50s that a party has carried the House despite losing the total number of votes added up. So to me, that's a pretty pretty big negative, and I think we're seeing that. We're going to have some continued gridlock because of it, and that just shows the power of the gerrymander and what gerrymandering can do to our government.
All right, Paul, you look like you got something to say on that topic.
I hope so.
Well, actually, I got to say, I had a positive, but Nick just changed mine. Just before my eyes, he changed it. My new positive is gridlock.
Yes.
All right, hold that thought. Dana, you've got to have something else to say about what Nick just said.
Well, the Democrats controlled the House and the Senate and the presidency from 2008 to 2010, and I don't recall the rainbows shining and kittens playing and butterfly-filled fields back then. So I'm not sure what you feel that you're expecting this time around. But the main thing that comes to mind is, and it's not necessarily a result of gerrymandering, it's just kind of ties in with the debate that we had on the Electoral College.
Right.
The House of Representatives is district to district, and maybe it's a result of how the lines were drawn, which each party has done when it's been in power when it comes time to redraw the lines. But fact is that that's what it is just district to district, and these things will happen.
All right. Well, that seems like a fair assessment in my opinion. All right. Dana, why don't you give us one of the negatives from the year 2012?
I think the most obvious one that comes to mind is the re-election of President Obama.
You think that's the biggest negative story out there?
Oh yeah, that overshadows so much for me. That President Romney was kind of the last hope that we had to get rid of Obamacare. Not to mention a lot of other things that might have happened as far as economic recovery and such. So yeah, as we go into 2013, we see Obamacare kind of starting to swing in full force, and at least a lot of the taxes hitting us now, and I don't see a whole lot of economic recovery on the horizon.
All right. Nick, you might maybe have a rebuttal to that. I don't know.
Oh, well, that just segues into my biggest positive story of 2012. And if you're looking on there's a little picture here on my my lower third, the winner. It was clearly a positive in my view. I think when you look at the fact that President Obama is the first president to win 2 elections with over 51% of the vote since Dwight D. Eisenhower, and I think that says something about there was some pretty important topics on the table as we went into 2012. Whether it's the recovery, whether it's the Affordable Care Act, it's had even tax laws and increasing tax rates on the wealthiest, the wealthiest brackets. That was pretty clearly articulated throughout the presidential election, and President Obama ran on it and won. So. All
right, Paul. What do you have to say about both that positive and negative event?
Well, I think it's pretty simple. We've got another 4 years of the economy as it is, another 4 years of drone bombings in countries that we're not even at war with, another 4 years of the same. So yeah, it's pretty bleak in my book. I think that the one interesting thing that we have to look forward to is I've never seen an economy in hyperinflation, so we'll probably get to see that. So it's going to be interesting.
So you're saying I should invest now?
In gold.
Okay. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about. Let's see, what have we done? Have we done a negative? I'm sorry, have we done a positive for you guys yet? So, Paul, do you have a positive?
I actually do. I have. I mean,
aside from gridlock.
Besides gridlock, right?
Yeah.
Gridlock is a positive, but I have another. No, actually, the other one is the market. I mean, honestly, we're still better off than what we were 10 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago. The market did that. We got there because of free markets, and that's a positive. We still actually have markets that are salvageable and bendable and still work in a reasonable manner. And I would say the markets.
You get that? We got that on tape, right?
Yep.
Okay. We
That's
got markets that
recorded.
work in a reasonable manner, despite the fact they've been regulated.
No. You're taking that out of context. They still, they manage to get around the garbage that they have to get around, because that's what they do. I mean, let's be honest here. You regulate an industry, and essentially it finds the loopholes, and it still manages to work. It's how it works. I mean, if you think you're fixing something through regulation, chances are you're not.
Okay, and this is another one of our classical arguments that you will hear over and over again from these two, and Dana obviously tends to be on Paul's side on this argument. And actually, let's go to Dana. Dana, what do you have for a positive for 2012?
I was drawing a blank, but something did come to mind as we've been talking, and that actually kind of sprung up for me. Thinking back through some of the stories of this year, and some of the negative stories first came back to my memory. One of those was the shooting in Aurora, Colorado, at the movie theater. That was the one before the opening of The Dark Knight Rises. But I remembered from this is a story that I read a day or two after that, and it's something positive, or at least inspiring to me, that has stuck with me. And that was a story, we can link to this, I suppose, story from the New York Daily News that talks about three guys, basically, that gave their lives taking bullets for their girlfriends. And I mean, not even their wives, but let me see, the names are John Blanc, Matt McQuinn, and Alex Tevis. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing any of those, but it basically describes how when the guy started shooting everybody, that each of these three guys sort of threw themselves on top of their girlfriends to help protect them, and ended up dying in the end. But I just kind of find that kind of self-sacrifice inspiring. I think that was a fairly positive message to take from that kind of love and self-sacrifice.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing that sort of chivalry still exists in the world, and is obviously demonstrated by the three guys that gave up their lives for their girlfriends. And I'm assuming the girlfriends all survived?
Yep. Yeah, as I recall. I haven't read the story since the shooting happened in July, but I seem to recall they all did, yeah.
That's kind of amazing. All right, well, let's go one last thing, and I'm going to ask each of you this question. I'm going to start with Nick on this one. Nick, what do you think is the most important thing that needs to happen to improve our country, to keep things moving significantly forward in 2013?
2013. I think we need to return to a functioning legislature. I mean, quite frankly, you can think about it in a number of ways. Whether it's reform of the filibuster in the Senate, which tends to block legislative action, or it's the use of the Hastert rule in the House, which basically was broken for the first time, yesterday or 2 days ago, when the House decided to vote for the for the change in tax rates.
How does that rule work exactly?
The Hastert rule basically says that no legislation will go up for a vote in the House of Representatives unless has a support of the majority party. So unless the majority of the Republican Party or the Republican representatives or caucus in the House supports a piece of legislation, it won't go to the floor. So first time it's been broken in quite some time by the Republicans was 2 days ago. So getting rid of that rule and getting rid of and that's, by the way, that's not like a legislative body rule. That's a caucus rule. So that's what the Speaker determines how he's going to push legislation to the floor. So we need to have more debate, and we need to have fair debate. And in order to do that, you gotta kind of get rid of these rules that stop debate.
Okay. All right, and I'm going to go with Dana next. Dana, what's the most important thing that we can do as a country to improve the country itself for this year, 2013?
I'd say I think people need to get serious about some of the realities that are facing them. All this talk, the main thing that comes to mind, all this talk about raising taxes on the rich, and all that is just not going to cut it. Arguments aside about whether it will hurt the economy or not, it's just the amount of revenue that's going to bring in is not going to solve our problems until people get serious about cutting spending and looking away from government as the solution to all of their problems. We're just going to keep digging ourselves deeper in a hole. I mean, that's an example, but there's, I guess, the overarching idea is so many, I don't know what, straw men, I guess, of so much in the political debate that people think are the problem or are the solution that really are the solution when it comes down to it.
Okay, so you want people to face reality and realize what's happening in front of them and what they really need to do to solve it, instead of whatever you think is going on now, which is more I don't know, kind of wishful thinking, perhaps, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, and making big deals out of things that really aren't ultimately that big of a deal. I'm thinking of like the Citizens United case, and people get all up in arms about corporations being able to make political speech. In the end, this is not the problem that we face. People are concerned about corporate influence on the government, and this is not the root problem that we're facing here. If that makes sense. I guess I'm not feeling terribly articulate. I'm rather distracted by the incredibly loud static that's in my ears right now. I think I've lost everything. Can you even still hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay.
John, can you hear us?
Nope.
I don't hear John.
No, I don't hear John either. I don't think he hears us.
Yeah, I can't hear John either.
That sounds problem. On the positive note, my static stopped.
Maybe it was John.
Maybe indeed.
Take us home, Paul.
That was, as I was talking, it was just getting louder and louder, man, and it just could not.
John, are you still with us?
He's moving. He can't hear us. Let me just wrap up the show for us, Paul.
Yeah.
I have one other positive, too.
Go for it.
Okay, go for it.
The Mayans were wrong.
You have a good point there. That's an excellent positive. Yeah, that's an excellent positive. And actually,
that's kind of a negative for me, though. That would have solved a lot of my problems.
To continue on with what John was, the final question that John asked, my answer to that final question, I think probably the number one thing that I would say could be done is to end the Fed, or create alternative money supplies. Competition, more liberty, just more liberty in general, actually. But on that note, you've been watching the Political Soup podcast, and this is this is me taking it home. Thanks a bunch for watching the show, and we'll see you next time.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.